The arena was alive with the roar of the crowd, 1,000 voices from different planets cheering for their champions. Today, the galaxy would witness an event unlike any other. A duel between an alien princess and a human soldier. The stakes were high, and no one knew what to expect from the human. Zorana, the alien warrior princess, stood tall in the center of the arena, her eyes burning with pride and confidence. She was a legend, known for her skill with a blade and her ruthless strength. Her people feared her, and enemies trembled at her name. She had never lost a fight, and this human, she doubted he would be any different. She was sure she would defeat him easily. After all, humans were weak, fragile, and unworthy of standing in the same arena as her. On the other side of the arena, Caden, the human soldier, stood still. His hands were sweaty, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't a warrior by trade, not like the others in the arena. He was a soldier, trained to fight, yes, but more used to strategy than brute force. But today, he had to fight for Earth's honor. His people had chosen him, and he wasn't going to let them down, no matter how impossible the task seemed. The two stood across from each other, facing off under the bright lights of the arena. Zorana's dark armor gleamed under the sunlight, her long, flowing hair like a banner of her status. Caden, dressed in the standard gear of a soldier, felt out of place, but his resolve was strong. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for his people. Zorana scoffed, her voice carrying across the arena. "You can't last a minute against me, human. I will show you what true power is," she taunted, her eyes narrowing with disdain. She gripped her sword tightly, confident in her superiority. Caden didn't respond with words. He didn't need to. His eyes locked with hers, and he gave a small nod. There was no turning back now. The moment had arrived. The announcer's voice boomed across the stadium, signaling the start of the duel. The crowd fell silent, anticipation filling the air. Zorana moved first, her speed almost a blur. She charged forward, her blade raised high, ready to strike. The crowd gasped, watching her incredible speed. Caden, however, didn't flinch. He had been trained for moments like this. He sidestepped her attack with ease, his movements calm and precise. Zorana's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, surprised by his agility. This human wasn't like the others. He was different. She swung again, her blade cutting through the air with deadly precision. But once again, Caden was one step ahead. His footwork was fast, calculated. Every movement he made was designed to keep him out of reach, to tire her out. Zorana growled, frustration creeping into her voice. She had never faced anyone who could evade her strikes with such ease. She wasn't used to this. This human was more than she had expected, and that made her all the more determined to win. But what Zorana didn't realize was that Caden was doing more than just surviving. He was studying her, learning her patterns. He was far from helpless, and the more he watched, the more he saw the cracks in her confidence. The crowd's roars filled the arena, but Caden's focus remained on Zorana, his eyes never leaving her. This fight was just beginning, and for the first time, Zorana was starting to wonder if she had underestimated her opponent. The battle between Caden and Zorana raged on, the crowd's cheers growing louder with each passing moment. Zorana, the legendary alien warrior princess, was no longer the picture of confidence. She had expected to crush this human in moments, but instead, she found herself struggling to land a hit. Each of her swings met empty air, and Caden, with his quick reflexes, dodged every strike. She could feel her frustration growing, and for the first time in her life, she started to doubt her own abilities. Caden, on the other hand, was beginning to understand his opponent. He could see the frustration in Zorana's eyes, and he knew that this was his moment. She was strong, fast, and skilled, but he had something she didn't: patience. He wasn't in a hurry to win. He was in a hurry to outlast her. His mind raced as he calculated his moves, staying just out of her reach while watching for any weakness. The crowd grew restless, shifting in their seats, sensing that something unexpected was unfolding in the arena. Zorana's strikes were starting to slow, her breath coming in heavy gasps. Her movements, once fluid and graceful, were now starting to feel forced. She had underestimated this human, and now she was paying the price. "Is this all you've got, human?" Zorana taunted, her voice sharp. She swung her sword in another wild arc, but Caden easily ducked under it. He felt the cool rush of air above his head as the blade missed him by inches. He could see the anger in her eyes, but he also saw something else: doubt. Zorana's next move was quicker, more aggressive, as if she were trying to make up for lost time. She lunged forward, her sword aimed straight for Caden's chest. But Caden was ready. In a split second, he sidestepped again, his hand brushing against her shoulder as she passed. It wasn't a strike, but it was enough to throw her off balance. Zorana stumbled, just for a second, but it was enough. She regained her footing quickly, but the damage had been done. The crowd gasped as they saw the princess, the untouchable warrior, falter. Caden saw the opportunity, and though his heart was racing, he kept his focus steady. His opponent was more than just a strong fighter. She was proud, and that pride was beginning to work against her. The announcer's voice echoed through the arena, but Caden barely heard it. His mind was fully on the fight. He could see Zorana's rapid breaths, hear the slight tremor in her movements. He knew that she was starting to feel the pressure of the fight, something she had never experienced before. She had always been the strongest, the best. But here she was, fighting a human soldier who refused to give up, no matter how many times she tried to strike him down. Zorana gritted her teeth, her fists tightening around her sword. Her pride was on the line now, and she wasn't going to let this human humiliate her. She had to win. She would win. But as the seconds ticked by, her confidence wavered, and the fight was far from over. Caden's strategy was simple: survive. And with each passing minute, it became more and more clear he was starting to win, not through strength, but through persistence. Zorana's patience was beginning to run out. Every move she made, every swing of her sword, was met with empty air. She had never encountered an opponent like this before, someone who was faster, more agile, and unpredictable. The princess had grown accustomed to overwhelming her enemies with sheer power, but Caden was different. He wasn't just dodging her attacks. He was forcing her to rethink her approach. With a low growl, Zorana charged again. This time, her sword came down in a powerful arc, aimed directly at Caden's head. The crowd watched, expecting to see the human soldier fall under the weight of her strike. But Caden didn't flinch. He twisted to the side, just narrowly avoiding the edge of her blade. He could feel the wind of the sword brushing past him, but he was already moving, using the momentum to duck and roll to the other side of the arena. Zorana's eyes narrowed, furious at how easily he had evaded her. "You're fast," she admitted, her voice cold. "But it won't be enough." Caden didn't respond. He didn't have to. His actions spoke louder than words. He was starting to learn Zorana's patterns, how she moved, how she thought. She was powerful, yes, but he knew how to outlast her. And that's exactly what he planned to do. Zorana struck again, this time aiming low. Her sword swiped toward Caden's legs, trying to catch him off guard. But Caden was already on his feet, jumping back just in time. He had seen the attack coming. He wasn't just reacting. He was reading her movements. The crowd was silent now, watching in disbelief. No one had expected the human to last this long. Many had expected him to be defeated within moments, but Caden had shown that humans weren't as weak as they had been made out to be. Zorana's frustration was clear. She swung her sword once more, this time in a sweeping motion, aiming to hit him from the side. The force behind the strike was immense, and for a moment, Caden thought he might not be able to dodge it. But just as the sword came down, he rolled forward, narrowly avoiding the deadly swing. The princess's eyes widened in shock. He had dodged it again. For the first time, she felt doubt creeping into her mind. How could this human be so quick? Every time she thought she had him, he was one step ahead. Caden landed on his feet, breathing heavily but focused. He could feel the strain in his muscles, the exhaustion creeping in. He had never fought someone like this before. Zorana was strong, powerful, and relentless. But Caden had something she didn't. He had something that couldn't be measured by strength or speed alone. Zorana wasn't used to being outmatched, especially by a human. Her pride had been shaken, and she didn't like it. She raised her sword again, her gaze fixed on Caden with renewed intensity. He had made her question everything she thought she knew about combat. And now she was going to make sure he knew who was in control. But Caden wasn't backing down. His heart raced, but his mind was calm. He knew that the longer this fight went on, the more he could wear her down. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. Zorana's anger boiled as she watched Caden evade another one of her strikes. He was too fast, too unpredictable, and it was starting to get under her skin. She had always relied on her strength and speed to overpower her enemies, but Caden was proving that there was more to victory than raw power. He was beginning to frustrate her, and she hated it. With a growl, Zorana charged again, faster than before, her sword raised high in a powerful strike aimed at Caden's head. She was determined to end this fight. She swung down, expecting him to back away like he had before. But this time, Caden did something different. Instead of moving back, he stepped forward, dodging the blade and closing the gap between them. Zorana's eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't have time to react. Caden was already on the move, his body moving with a fluidity she hadn't expected. He ducked under her guard, his hands pressing against her shoulder to push her off balance. Zorana stumbled back, her sword slipping from her grip for a brief moment. It was enough to give Caden an opening. He lunged, trying to catch her off guard with a quick jab. But Zorana recovered quickly, spinning to face him. She smirked, showing no sign of fear. "You've got spirit, human, but it's not enough." She gripped her sword tightly, ready to strike again. Caden didn't respond. He didn't have to. He was too busy thinking. He realized something in that moment. Zorana's strength was undeniable, but she was losing control. She was fighting with anger and pride, and that was exactly what he needed to take advantage of. Caden's breathing was steady, though the fight was taking its toll. Every movement felt like it drained his energy, but he was determined. The longer he kept Zorana on the defensive, the more likely she would make a mistake, and Caden was patient. Humans had always been known for their resilience, their ability to endure when faced with the impossible. It wasn't just about strength, it was about persistence. Zorana's frustration grew as she swung again, this time in a desperate attempt to end the battle. Her attack was fast and furious, her sword cutting through the air with a deadly hiss. Caden barely managed to block the blow with his arm raised to shield himself, but the force of the strike sent a shockwave through his body, causing him to stagger back. "Come on, human," Zorana shouted, her voice dripping with contempt. "Is this all you've got?" Caden wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes never leaving her. "You think you've already won, don't you?" he said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. "But you're wrong. You don't understand humans." Zorana laughed, but there was uncertainty in her eyes now. "You can't win," she sneered, but there was a flicker of doubt in her tone. "You've lasted this long by luck, but it won't last." But Caden wasn't relying on luck. He wasn't relying on strength. He was relying on something far deeper, the unyielding determination of a human fighting against overwhelming odds. And in that moment, Zorana finally realized that this fight wasn't going to end the way she expected. Caden had proven one thing to her. Humans weren't as weak as she had thought. And that was something she wasn't prepared for. Zorana's grip tightened around her sword, her knuckles turning white. Her chest heaved with each breath as she stared down at Caden, who stood across from her, unwavering. The human had surprised her at every turn, and despite her rage, she could not ignore the growing respect she felt for him. She had expected an easy victory, but Caden had shown her the strength of human will. Her frustration was turning into something more dangerous: determination. She wasn't about to let a human defeat her, not after everything she had done to reach this point. She was the princess of a mighty warrior race, and the galaxy had feared her for centuries. She wasn't about to lose to someone like him. With a growl, Zorana charged again, faster than ever. This time, she aimed to overpower him with her speed and force. She swung her blade in a wide arc, expecting Caden to try and dodge. But this time, Caden didn't move. Instead, he stood his ground, watching her every move, waiting for the right moment. The crowd gasped as Zorana's sword swung down, its sharp edge glinting in the light. Caden didn't flinch. At the last second, he stepped to the side, his footwork precise and calculated. His hand reached out just as the sword passed him, grabbing Zorana's wrist in a swift, controlled motion. Zorana's eyes widened in shock. She had never been caught like this before. She tried to pull her arm back, but Caden's grip was like iron. His face was calm, almost emotionless, while her own heart raced with panic. She had underestimated him. And now, for the first time in the fight, she could feel the power shift. Caden wasn't finished. He twisted her wrist, making Zorana lose her balance for a moment. It wasn't enough to throw her off completely, but it was enough to give Caden an opening. With one quick move, he knocked her sword out of her hand, sending it flying to the other side of the arena. Zorana stood there, stunned. Her eyes flicked to her weapon, but she didn't move. For a moment, she was frozen, unsure of what to do. She had never been disarmed in a fight before. Never had someone made her feel so vulnerable. Caden took a step back, his eyes never leaving hers. His chest was rising and falling with deep breaths, but his body language was calm, composed. "You don't need a sword to win," he said, his voice steady but firm. "You've already shown me what you're capable of, but you've underestimated me." Zorana clenched her fists, trying to regain her composure. She was furious at herself for being caught off guard, furious at the human who had turned the tables in the blink of an eye. She had never faced an opponent who had pushed her this far. She looked at Caden, her pride burning in her chest. "This isn't over," she spat, her voice low and dangerous. "You think you've won, but I'll show you what real power is." But Caden stood tall, ready for whatever came next. He knew Zorana wasn't finished. She wouldn't give up that easily. But in this moment, the fight had changed. Zorana had lost her advantage, and now it was Caden's turn to show her the strength of the human spirit. The crowd, sensing the shift, held its breath in anticipation. What would happen next? Would Zorana's pride lead to her downfall, or would she find a way to turn the fight back in her favor? Only time would tell. But one thing was clear: the battle was far from over. Zorana's mind raced as she stood without her sword, facing Caden. Her breathing was heavy, her chest rising and falling with each breath. The anger was still there, burning inside her, but so was something else. A sense of respect for this human who had managed to outmaneuver her at every turn. She had never met anyone like him. The princess had fought battles across the galaxy, but never had an opponent made her feel this uncertain, this challenged. Caden's eyes were steady, calm, and unwavering. He stood before her, ready, his posture relaxed but full of purpose. He was not a warrior, not in the traditional sense. He had no grand title or battle-hardened reputation. Yet here he was, having taken down one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy. Zorana gritted her teeth and clenched her fists. She couldn't lose. She wouldn't let this human defeat her. She would find a way to win, no matter the cost. The princess took a deep breath, pushing her anger to the back of her mind. It was time to fight with everything she had. She lunged at him again, faster than before. But this time, there was a difference. Caden didn't just move to avoid her strike. He moved to counter it. He anticipated her every move, stepping into her attack rather than away from it, and using his body to twist her momentum. He had studied her, learned from her actions. Zorana swung wildly, but Caden ducked under her arm, using his shoulder to push her off balance. Zorana stumbled again, caught off guard by his unexpected movement. But this time, she didn't have the time to recover. Caden was already on the move, moving quicker than she had ever seen a human move before. He grabbed her arm and twisted it, just enough to make her drop to one knee. The crowd gasped in awe as they watched Zorana, the undefeated warrior princess, struggle against the human soldier. For the first time in the fight, Zorana's confidence faltered. She had always been the one to control the fight, to dominate her opponents. But now, it was the human who was controlling the pace. She could feel the pressure building. Her body was aching, her mind clouded with frustration. This wasn't supposed to be happening. Caden, however, remained calm, his movements precise and calculated. He knew he wasn't going to win through sheer strength. He didn't have Zorana's power or skill. But he had something else, a human's ability to adapt and learn. He had been watching her, studying her every move. The more he fought, the more he understood her. He didn't need to defeat her with brute force. He just needed to outlast her. The princess gritted her teeth, refusing to give up. She pushed against his hold, using all her strength to break free. She twisted her body, throwing Caden off balance for a moment. But just as she thought she had regained control, Caden was back, faster than before. Zorana's eyes widened as he moved toward her again. But this time, something was different. The human wasn't just surviving anymore. He was thriving. His movements were sharp, fluid, and precise. Each strike, each movement was a calculated step toward victory. And with each passing moment, the princess realized that Caden wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something much deeper. He was fighting for the human spirit. Zorana's pride, once so unshakable, began to crumble. She realized that she had been wrong about humans. They weren't weak. They weren't fragile. They were strong, resilient, and relentless. The fight was far from over, but Zorana knew one thing for sure now. This human was not to be underestimated. Zorana's mind raced as she tried to regain her footing. The anger that had once burned hot within her now mingled with an unfamiliar sense of doubt. She had always prided herself on being the strongest, the fiercest warrior in the galaxy. She had never met an opponent who could challenge her so thoroughly, especially not a human. The fight had started with her in control, but now the power was shifting. Caden stood before her, breathing heavily but still focused. His movements were precise, almost effortless. She had underestimated him from the start, but now she was beginning to realize just how much he had been learning from her. Every move, every step he took, seemed to anticipate hers. It was as if he had figured her out, piece by piece, and he was using that knowledge against her. Zorana tried to shake off the feeling of unease creeping into her chest. She had never been unsure of herself in a fight. But Caden's calmness, his ability to adapt, was starting to get under her skin. She had always believed that strength was the key to victory. But now she was forced to confront the fact that it wasn't just strength that made a fighter powerful. It was the mind, the ability to think, to learn, and to endure. "Why are you still standing?" Zorana hissed, her voice laced with frustration. "You should be on the ground by now." Caden didn't answer. He didn't need to. His body was sore, every muscle aching, but he refused to back down. He knew that Zorana was the stronger of the two, but he also knew that strength alone wasn't enough. He had been pushed to the limit, but he wasn't going to stop fighting. He was fighting for something bigger than himself. He was fighting for Earth, for humanity, for the belief that no matter the odds, they could rise above them. Zorana's sword lay on the ground beside her, discarded after their struggle. She wasn't used to fighting without it, and for the first time, she felt a twinge of vulnerability. She had always relied on her blade to do the talking, to help her win. But now, without it, She was starting to realize how much she had relied on it to mask her weaknesses. Caden's eyes never left her, his stance steady. He wasn't attacking. He was watching, waiting for her next move. It was as if he knew that she had no choice but to come to him. Zorana gritted her teeth, her pride refusing to let her back down. She couldn't let this human win. She wouldn't let him make a fool of her. With a roar, she lunged forward again, her fists clenched as she aimed to land a devastating blow. But Caden sidestepped, his body moving with fluid precision. Zorana's momentum carried her forward, and before she could recover, Caden was behind her. He placed a hand on her back, pushing her forward with just enough force to knock her off balance. Zorana stumbled but caught herself, breathing heavily. She was no longer sure if she was fighting for victory or just to preserve her own pride. She had never faced an opponent like this. Someone who wasn't just fighting with skill, but with the determination of someone who would never give up. For the first time, Zorana doubted herself. She had been sure of her victory, but now, the uncertainty gnawed at her. Was it possible that she was losing to a human? The arena was eerily silent as Zorana stood across from Caden, her chest heaving with each breath. Her pride had been shattered. Her confidence, once so unbreakable, was now in ruins. She had never imagined that a human could challenge her this much. Never had she thought that she would be brought to the brink of defeat by someone so ordinary. But here she was, standing before the human soldier who had outsmarted, outlasted, and outmaneuvered her at every turn. Caden was still standing tall, his body exhausted, but his spirit unbroken. His face was focused, eyes never leaving hers. He knew this fight wasn't over, not yet. Zorana was still dangerous, still fierce. But he also knew that she had underestimated him from the start. She had assumed that strength alone would be enough to win, but he had proved that there was more to combat than raw power. Zorana's hand trembled slightly as she clenched her fists, the urge to strike back almost overwhelming. She had never been in this position before. She had always been the one in control, the one dictating the fight. Now, for the first time, it was Caden who held the upper hand. "You are strong," Caden said, his voice calm but firm. "But strength isn't enough. You've relied on it your whole life, but it can only take you so far." Zorana's eyes narrowed. "Enough of your words," she snapped, her voice cold and sharp. "You think you've won. I'll show you what true strength is." With a roar, Zorana charged at Caden again, her speed unmatched. She swung her fist with everything she had, aiming for his chest. Caden didn't flinch. He had expected this. He sidestepped, letting her pass just inches away from him. His heart raced as he moved quickly, catching her off guard. He reached out, grabbing her by the arm and spinning her around. Zorana tried to break free, but Caden's grip was like iron. The crowd held its breath as they watched the human soldier and the alien princess struggle. Caden's movements were precise, his focus unwavering. Zorana, on the other hand, was starting to lose her cool. Her strikes were becoming wild, desperate, as if she were trying to overpower him with nothing but fury. "You're losing control," Caden said quietly, his voice steady. "You've forgotten why you're fighting. This isn't about power. This is about understanding." Zorana's eyes flashed with rage. She swung again, but this time, Caden was ready. He twisted her arm, forcing her to the ground. The princess fell to her knees, gasping for breath. She looked up at Caden, her chest rising and falling rapidly. This was it, the moment she had dreaded. She had underestimated him, and now there was no way to recover. Her strength had failed her, and now the human had beaten her at her own game. Caden stood tall, looking down at Zorana. He didn't raise a hand to strike. He didn't need to. He had already won. He had defeated the warrior princess not through strength, but through perseverance, intelligence, and the sheer will to never give up. Zorana remained on her knees, staring at the ground, her pride in tatters. She had lost, and there was no denying it. The crowd erupted in applause, but Caden barely heard it. He wasn't here for the glory. He was here to prove something. To himself, to humanity, and to Zorana. And as he stood victorious, he realized one thing. The fight wasn't just about winning. It was about showing that humanity, no matter the odds, would always rise. The arena was still buzzing with excitement. But for Caden, the noise seemed far away. His breath was steady now, though the fight had taken everything out of him. He stood tall, looking down at Zorana, who was still kneeling on the ground. Her armor was scratched, her breathing heavy. She had fought hard. But now, for the first time in the battle, she seemed vulnerable. It was clear that the once unshakable princess had been defeated, not just by Caden's skill, but by the unexpected resilience of a human. Zorana remained still for a moment, her eyes focused on the ground. The pride that had once burned so fiercely within her was now a flicker, struggling to stay alive. She had never imagined that someone like Caden, someone so different from her in every way, would bring her to her knees. She had underestimated him. And now she was forced to confront the reality of her loss. Caden didn't approach her immediately. He stayed where he was, waiting, giving her space. He knew this wasn't just a physical defeat. It was something deeper. Zorana's strength had always been more than just her combat skills. It had been her pride, her belief that she was untouchable. Now, that belief had been shattered. Finally, Zorana lifted her head, her eyes meeting Caden's. There was no anger in them, no contempt, only a quiet respect, the kind that came from understanding someone's strength, even if it meant admitting they had outdone you. You should have lost, she said, her voice quieter than before. I never thought a human could defeat me. Caden nodded, his expression calm. I didn't win because I'm stronger. I won because I refused to give up. Zorana's lips twitched into a small, almost reluctant smile. I see that now. She stood slowly, still a little unsteady, and reached out a hand to him. The gesture was not one of defeat but of acknowledgement. Caden took her hand firmly, helping her to her feet. There was no triumph in his eyes, only the recognition that this fight had been as much about respect as it had been about survival. The princess had been an opponent worthy of respect, and though he had bested her, he knew that her strength was undeniable. The crowd, still roaring, seemed to sense the shift in the air. It wasn't just a victory for Caden. It was a victory for humanity itself, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humans could rise to meet them. But Caden knew that this was not just about Earth. It was about something greater. It was about proving that anyone, no matter how small or underestimated, had the power to change the outcome. Zorana, now standing beside him, looked at the crowd. You've shown me something, human, she said, her voice steady. I didn't believe in your kind before, but now, I see your strength. I see the strength of humanity. Caden gave a small smile. Thank you, princess. You fought well. Zorana nodded, her pride intact in the quiet, meaningful exchange. The galaxy will remember this day, she said. It won't be just about me. It will be about you, about humans, about what you are capable of. And for the first time in the battle, Caden felt truly victorious, not just for defeating Zorana, but for earning her respect, for showing the galaxy that humanity had more to offer than anyone had ever believed. The arena grew quieter, the cheers of the crowd fading into the background as Caden and Zorana stood together, side by side. Two warriors from different worlds, bound by the respect earned through battle. The fight was over, but their journey, the journey of humanity, had only just begun. The cheers of the crowd echoed throughout the arena, but to Caden, it all felt distant. His legs were sore, his body battered from the intense fight. Yet there was no pain in his chest, no sense of exhaustion that could drown out the feeling of accomplishment. He had done it, not through strength, but through endurance, strategy, and the simple refusal to give up. Beside him, Zorana stood, her stance no longer filled with the proud arrogance she had entered with. Her armor was scratched, her eyes no longer full of the burning certainty that she would emerge victorious. Instead, there was a quiet respect in her gaze, one that was unmistakable. She hadn't just lost a battle. She had lost her belief in her own invincibility. And in that moment, she knew that humans weren't the weaklings she had always thought them to be. The crowd, still buzzing with excitement, began to quiet down as the two fighters stood together at the center of the arena. Zorana turned her head slightly, meeting Caden's eyes. "You've done what no one thought possible, human," she said, her voice no longer laced with mockery, but with something deeper, genuine admiration. "You've shown me the power of your kind." Caden's expression softened. He had fought not just for survival, but for respect. Zorana had been a fierce opponent, and in the heat of battle, he had learned just how formidable she was. Yet, even as she acknowledged him now, he knew that the real victory was not just in defeating her, but in earning her respect. That, in itself, was an achievement. "You were an amazing opponent," Caden said, his voice steady and sincere. "I didn't think I could last as long as I did, but you didn't make it easy. You pushed me to be better." Zorana's lips curved into a small smile, and she gave a slight nod. "You've earned your place, human. I've fought warriors from across the galaxy, but I've never faced someone quite like you." The moment between them, once filled with tension and rivalry, now felt different. It was a moment of mutual understanding, a moment where two fighters from different worlds could see beyond the surface and truly respect each other's strengths. The crowd, witnessing the unexpected outcome of the battle, slowly began to applaud. The cheers were mixed with disbelief. Humans had never been considered a threat in the galactic arena, but today, Caden had proved that they were more than capable of holding their own against the most powerful beings in the universe. As the applause continued, Caden took a step back, glancing around at the faces of the spectators from different worlds. The message was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They had shown the galaxy what they were made of, and no one would forget the fight that had just unfolded. Zorana looked at Caden one last time, her eyes full of respect. "I will spread the word," she said. "The galaxy will know the strength of humans. This won't be the last time your kind surprises us." Caden smiled, a sense of pride swelling inside him. He had done what he had set out to do. He had proven that humans were not weak. They were resilient, clever, and strong in ways that even the most powerful warriors couldn't predict. As they walked off the battlefield together, side by side, the crowd continued to roar with approval. It was clear that the universe had just witnessed the beginning of something new, something that would forever change the way they saw humans. Caden wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a symbol of human strength, resilience, and the unyielding spirit that defined his people. And in that moment, he knew that this fight, this victory, was just the first of many. The future was uncertain, but humanity had proven one thing. When they fought, they didn't just survive. They thrived.